Welcome to the Talking Book Voices, the podcast, where we explore the wonders of the Texas Talking Book program. Join us in making literature accessible to all. This program, a division of the Texas State Library and Archives Commission, provides a free library service to Texans of all ages with a qualifying visual, physical, or reading disability. In each episode, we'll uncover its history, share stories, get updates and tips to maximize this invaluable program. So whether you love reading, seeking accessible materials, or just curious about the program, this podcast is for you. Visit www.texastalkingbooks.org for more info. So let's begin the Talking Book Voices, a podcast by the Texas State Library and Archives Commission.
Hi, podcast listeners. My name is Laura Jean, and I've been a Reader's Advisory Librarian here at the Talking Book program for 9 years now. Before that, I've worked as a library assistant at various different academic and public libraries for 12 years. And I'm here today with patron and Braille literacy advocate, Neva Fairchild. Neva, welcome to the Texas Talking Book Voices.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, the pleasure is all ours, I assure you. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Neva.
I am 67 years old, and I have been using talking books. Started in Texas. They moved with me as I moved around the country when my dad was in the military since I was 7 years old. So 60 years, probably. This year is 59. It'll be 60 years in 2025, which I don't know. It's kind of hard to wrap my brain around the fact that I've been using a service and enjoying a service that long. And I'll have to tell you that the oldest phone number that I can remember is the 800 number to the Talking Book program in Texas.
Wow, that is great. That is great. But
I've always known that number from back in the day when we had dial telephones.
no, that's great. And I know what you mean about sometimes time sneaks up on you. You turn around and go, how did that happen?
Yeah. I can't really imagine how I'm this old, to be honest with you. It really doesn't make me feel old when I turn a New Year's birthday, but when my children do, I just kind of wonder, how is it possible I've got a 46-year-old son and a 43-year-old daughter? Can't imagine.
So how did you become a patron? I guess you were fairly young, so you came in as a child.
I did, yeah. I was born with a visual impairment. At the time, it was misdiagnosed as retrolental fibroplasia or retinopathy of prematurity, which I was premature.
Mm-hmm.
And I may have had some ROP, but through many different misdiagnoses, finally, about 3 years ago, I had genetic testing done, and I have Stargardt disease, which most of the time you think of Stargardt as juvenile macular degeneration, 2200 vision at worst,
Mm-hmm.
Low vision, able to read large print, that type of thing. Well, I never had 2200 vision. And as of probably about 10, maybe 8 years ago, I have really no usable vision. I see lights and darks. Sometimes they're really there and sometimes they're not. And it's my brain filling in funny little pictures to entertain me. And so I have to rely on my other senses. I cannot trust my vision for anything anymore.
That's got to be a little frustrating to be in a situation where you think you can see something, but maybe that is just your brain filling in the gaps.
I have finally learned to not trust that because it often led me astray, and it's not really there. I'll walk into a room and say to my husband, "Why are you sitting here in the dark?" And he's like, "The lights are on." Oh, okay. And then I'll walk into a room and I'll think the lights are on and I'll go feel all the light bulbs and there's not a light on. It's all dark, but my brain is producing this little glow. And so anyway, I think it's a pretty common experience of people with inherited retinal disease because as our retina cells deteriorate, they send false signals to our brain, and that's what produces it. And I was born into a military family. And so every place we moved, once my parents found out I could not see as well as the other kids could see, which we didn't discover till I was probably 4,
Mhm.
when a preschool teacher told my parents, I think Neva has something wrong with her vision, because when we do story time and all the kids sit on their little carpet squares in a circle, every time I turn the book around to show it to the class, she jumps up and runs forward and puts her face on it to see the pictures.
Oh.
And so that's the start of my, find the cure journey that my parents were on, with no results, except when I finally got to see a low vision specialist. And that was the doctor that recommended me to get the talking book program, because I love to read. But
Mhm.
as a kid, you know how big the print is in first grade books and
Oh,
second
yeah.
grade books,
Mhm.
right? So if I held that right up against my face, I could read it. And I was a voracious reader. My parents could not keep me in books. We would go to the library weekly and I would read through the books I got in no time. And I then started having trouble because the print gets smaller as you get more advanced in
Uh-huh.
reading and as your grade increases. And that's when the low vision specialist referred me to talking books and gave me my first monocular.
Oh,
What's
those are
interesting
big
about that
to
time, yeah, what's interesting about that time is she didn't recommend a magnifying glass.
Hmm.
And that I didn't get till I was in 7th grade. And I would suspect from knowing what I know about low vision aids now, it was probably a 3X, and it was just a round lens with a handle, kind of like a Sherlock Holmes
Oh, yeah.
magnifier. No light, no nothing. But that helped for a long time. And then amazingly enough, in my 20s, I went to a new low vision specialist and he fitted me with a pair of hyper optic reading glasses.
Mhm.
And it's called hyper optic because it's a big, fat, high powered lens for one eye, because it's too high powered to get binocular vision. You can't wear
Sure.
2 lenses, so it wouldn't work. So I still had to use one eye, which my left eye was my best eye. And with those 8X hyper optic reading glasses, I could read regular print, regular size print. I could read the
Wow.
phone book. I could read magazines. I could read mail order catalogs. I could read the directions on the back of the cake box. Um, and and yet, even through all of that time where I could read different kinds of print with different kinds of magnification, I kept reading talking books because it was so enjoyable and relaxing to be able
Yeah.
to listen to somebody with a great voice read me a book. And when I started out, they were on hard records.
Mhm.
So your record player, had to live in a room. You couldn't move it around with you like you could when they switched to cassettes, and now how you can with the digital talking book player.
Mhm.
You were stuck in your room. So my mother would, get frustrated with me. Go to your room. Okay. Because guess what was in my room?
Your record player.
My books.
That's wonderful. So, okay, so then your journey, you were struggling as and with assistance, but you were using low vision aids in order to read for the longest time. At what point did you investigate Braille?
Well, that's an interesting story too, because through my 20s and into my 30s, those glasses were my savior. And I went to college at 18, right out of high school,
Mhm.
and I got my MRS degree. And
What
as
was
a
it? I'm just
as a
curious.
senior, left college with my husband because he had finished his master's degree, and we had a baby by then. And it was time to feed that child and get a job somewhere, right?
Mhm.
And so I was a stay-at-home mom for 9 or 10 years. That's when I got the great reading glasses, and I went back to school 9 years later in 1986 to figure out what I wanted to do, because my first 3 years in college I thought I wanted to be an elementary school teacher. And
Mhm.
after volunteering in my son's classroom and helping out at his school, when my daughter started kindergarten, I went back to college and I said, okay, I know I don't want to be a teacher. Now, what else can I be?
Sure.
I really felt like I could not handle the visual demands of a classroom and have any energy at all left over at the end of the day for my own family.
Right.
And being low vision and using your eyes, for everything is exhausting.
Mhm.
I lived every day of my life until I stopped using my eyes so much with a headache. I thought headaches, I mean, I knew it wasn't normal, but I just thought it was something I had to accept and live with.
Right.
And so I went back to college and I got my bachelor's and then my master's in rehabilitation counseling psychology.
Oh, wonderful.
And I knew I wanted to work in rehabilitation for people who are blind or have low vision.
Hmm.
And so I went to work at first a lighthouse as a vocational evaluator. That lasted about a year. And then I went to work for the state as a vocational rehabilitation counselor. And I started encountering difficulties that I hadn't encountered in my life or in my first job, like scheduling appointments with multiple people and multiple meetings every day and way far in advance. Before that, I was able to keep my calendar in my head.
Oh, yes, yes.
All of a sudden, I mean, I was scheduling, 4 to 6 appointments a day and sometimes 2 and 3 weeks out. And I just could do it. So I had to figure out something. So I invented a large print calendar with my sister's help.
Nice.
And we actually turned it into a little cottage business. And then I also talked to a technology specialist about how much trouble I was having with the file cabinet because I had case files for over 100 people that were on my caseload.
Hmm.
And I had put large print labels on the front flap of the file folder, which they were big, thick file folders, not little manila folders. And they filled up a 4 drawer filing cabinet. And so I could get my nose close to the large print labels on the top drawer if I stood up, and I could get to the second and the third drawer if I sat down and leaned way in. That bottom drawer, impossible. It was
Yeah,
like hands and knees, not very graceful in front of a client, right?
right.
And so I talked to a technology specialist about this, and she said, "Well, Neva, have you ever thought about learning Braille?" And I said, "What?" She's like, "You could learn Braille." And like most other people on the planet, I think, I thought Braille was just for people who were totally blind, who wanted to read War and Peace. Okay.
That's fair. I mean, that's how it was. I'm visually impaired too, and and since birth, and that's how I assumed too. The Braille was only taught to the people that needed it. If you could, catch as catch can with regular print or large print, that's where they aimed me.
Right. That's right. And I never had a teacher that visually impaired when I was in school because I graduated high school in 1974,
Hmm.
and that's when the IDEA was enacted. But before that, I had nothing. Okay.
Yeah.
And so it was just kind of learn and catch as catch can, like you said. And it just never occurred to me. And so in 3 nights, a colleague at work taught me the Braille code, the 26 letters.
Hmm.
And I was baby dog slow, but I could read it. And it was so exciting to be able to read something without straining my eyes.
Yeah.
I could just use my fingertips, which at the time had no difficulties. That's a different story now. But at the time, I had no difficulties reading, print braille or hard copy braille. Paper braille is what I like to
Hmm.
call it. And I went on to learn the entire code. I never built any speed, but I used it every day.
Hmm.
After I got my 26 letters of the alphabet, my colleague went back to work one day and told the receptionist, "Neva will take all of her phone messages in Braille now." I'm like, "What?" Well, it was really kind of nice because it gave me practice.
Yeah.
And before I got my phone messages. We didn't have voicemail in those days. And I got my phone messages on 3x5 index cards that were typewritten with a really basic dot matrix printer. So the letters weren't well formed and they weren't very dark. And I had to read those with a video magnifier. And then when that receptionist was off duty, the receptionist that filled in did those little pink while you were out slips, which I couldn't read at all, even with the video magnifier. because they were handwritten. And I just never was able to decipher other people's handwriting.
Yeah.
And so I would always have to go to somebody else. Hey, who's this? What do I need to call? Who do I need to call? What's their number? That kind of thing.
Mhm.
And when I started getting them in Braille, I could read them. And I had a little bit of trouble with some of the contractions at first, but
Sure.
it didn't take me long to get through the basic contractions. And when it's just a name and a phone number, there's not a lot of fancy words, right?
Correct.
And and that really was what made my Braille reading of numbers really strong, because I had to read that phone number and dial the phone. And so that was how I first got started. And then I expanded to playing games and making personal notes. And in my work, I had to do presentations. So Braille gave me the ability to write a simple outline, maybe like 4 or 5 lines and 2 or 3 words, not verbatim what I was going to say, but the 5 points I wanted to be sure and make, so that when I got up in front of an audience and I was all nervous, I wouldn't forget. I could remind myself, what was my next point? Is when you're doing live presentations, you can get scared and you can
Oh,
forget what you want to say.
absolutely.
Yeah, and labeling my pantry, my canisters have Braille. Just I just used Braille everywhere in the house. And I started talking to people I worked with at the state, and then eventually at American Foundation for the Blind. I went to work for them in 2008 and was there for over 15 years. I started talking to people about how important Braille can be for functional literacy.
Mhm.
You may never read an entire book in Braille if you don't learn Braille as a kid and use it in school, so that you build up reading speed and you can, get through material and comprehend it as well as, make progress, not just read a paragraph a day. But for functional purposes, Braille is such a useful tool. I don't care how old you are, to be able to jot down a phone number, to be able to play cards with your family and friends. I mean, really, to play cards, you only have to learn 13 characters of the alphabet, because it's A through J, which is 1 through 0. That makes all the numbers on the cards,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
Then there's K for king. Then there's Q for queen, and there's S for spades. And you can play cards. That's it. I think that would give a lot of people, especially people losing vision later in life, a social outlet that they may have lost
No,
because of their vision loss.
I agree. No, I mean, and I like what you're saying about functional literacy, because you're right. A lot of people, and they mean well, but they have this idea of Braille as being, well, I'm not going to just sit down and read books in Braille, or that's too clunky or whatever. But functional literacy is the key.
Yep,
It's very good point. I mean, just so you can live your life, so you can say, oh, this is cumin and not cinnamon.
that's right. And for years, I only used Braille to know which side of the album or which side of the cassette was the odd side, 1, 3, 5. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah,
That's all I used it for. I couldn't read the Braille. I just knew if the side had the Braille, it was the top side. It was the first side, right?
right, right.
And then when I could actually read the titles and know what cassette it was just amazing. And now I have a Braille e-reader,
Hmm.
and I'm still slow, and I'm so grateful I have it because I have peripheral neuropathy. Um Idiopathic peripheral neuropathy. I think that's supposed to mean only idiots get it, because it's really not fun. But
Hey,
really what it means is they don't know what causes it. Okay, thank
right.
you very much. But my ability to read paper Braille is pretty much gone. If it's a brand new embossed, piece of paper, it hasn't gone through the mail. If I write it on my Perkins Brailler, mostly I can read it because I know what it says. If I read it 3 weeks from now or 3 months from now, it'll be a struggle.
Hmm.
But if it's really high quality, it's sort of readable. But everything is not high quality in paper Braille. But my Braille e-reader, I can read it perfectly well because of the metal pins,
Hmm.
and the dot size is just It's just more discernible to my fingertips. And so I have been really enjoying having that and being able to, I'm not reading books with it either, but I am downloading magazines and reading articles in magazines.
Good. Yeah,
And
it's a bit shorter too, so it's not as intense as an entire book.
that's right. That's right. Yeah. And I used Braille when my grandchildren were young. I bought the print Braille books from like National Braille Press and Seedlings. I didn't know that Talking Books had them. Now I do, but I really can't read them anymore very well. So I haven't gotten any. I love the fact that y'all have the print Braille books for parents who are blind to read to sighted children,
Mhm.
and for blind children to read to their siblings and to their parents. I think it's just marvelous. But I got those books so that I could read to my grandchildren. Now I'll tell you that I never really built up enough speed that past the age of about 3, the kids would sit and listen to me. They would, Grandma, you're too slow. The dog would listen to me, but the kids got bored and went and did other things.
But at the same time, and again, with most of these things, the speed doesn't matter. As you said, when you're if you learn as a child and then you practice it all through school, that's one thing. But if you're coming to it later in life, generally, there's no rush necessarily to
No,
read a magazine article or that sort of thing. So
exactly. And
it,
for me, it's personal communications too, like the outlines for presentations and the when I travel, I travel a lot with my work.
mhm,
And when I travel, I have all my information on my iPhone about my flight and my hotel and all of that stuff.
mhm,
And yeah, when you get caught in an airport with delays and oh, you didn't pack your charger. Okay, well, when you get to your destination, your phone is dead. What hotel was that? What was their
mhm.
number? Yeah, I have it on a Braille index card that I create with a slate and stylus as my fail-safe backup plan, that I can go to a taxi stand. You don't have to have your phone to take a taxi. I can go to the taxi stand at the airport and tell them the name of the hotel and tell them the address and tell them the phone number if they, aren't familiar with it or we get lost or something like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Backups are important, and I mean, and so you touched on this a little bit as far as Braille literacy being part of the functional literacy, being one of the avenues that can help you be less isolated, to be have more social connections, to be able to do things with friends and family who are sighted, and um, but and of course also you mentioned as far as travel and in your work. Overall, though, why do you feel that Braille literacy is important? And I'm not taking this side. I'm just throwing this out as devil's advocate. There are a lot of entities out there who will say, we can have it all in audio. We can digitize things now. It's not so important for Braille to be available. Why would you disagree with that statement?
I disagree with that because batteries are not required if you read Braille.
That is fair.
um, and I continue to listen to audiobooks. I will always listen to audiobooks for my entertainment. But if I need a recipe, it's so much easier in Braille to follow a recipe than it is to listen, rewind, listen, rewind, listen, rewind, you know?
Mhm.
And really, for technical kinds of things, for instructions, for reference materials, that kind of thing, you just can't beat Braille for getting to the piece of information you want quickly and easily. Um, I use audio like I have a digital recorder. I don't always write my notes down in Braille if it's going to be transient or I'm not going to be near where I keep that digital recorder. It lives on my desk. It doesn't live in my purse, right?
Right.
It, it, there's room in this world for all forms of media, and Braille is the tool to me that takes the least amount of technology. Now, that doesn't include the Braille e-reader. That's some pretty sophisticated technology, and technology I never thought I would really get to have for myself, because Braille refreshable Braille displays are expensive.
They are extremely expensive, yes.
And even though, through my working career, my company, my employer bought me devices that had refreshable Braille displays on it once I learned Braille.
Mhm.
I never felt like, when I left those jobs, I never felt like I could afford to replace that technology myself.
Right.
And so now I would call me semi-retired. I have a small business where I'm doing expert witness services for attorneys litigating cases involving people who are blind or visually impaired. And I work part-time for a company called Way Around that is a tag and scan system that works beautifully with a refreshable Braille display in an iPhone or an Android phone or a Blind Shell 2 phone. And without my Braille, I don't think I would be able to do my job as effectively,
Mhm.
because it's my go-to when I need to mark something, when I need to label something. Simple one word labels. If not, if it's a multi-word label, then I use my way around tags, but then I can read it with my Braille e-reader. If I want to, like, do a recipe, like I actually add recipes to my cinnamon spice bottle tag,
Uh-huh.
because I make up my own recipes a lot, and I like to remember, okay, in that recipe I used 1 teaspoon the last time, and if after I bake it and I don't think it's cinnamony enough, I go
Mhm.
back and I change on my tag, use 2 teaspoons in the spice spread, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's my personal recipe. It's not a recipe book I'm following. It's my recipe.
Yeah.
And it's where I need it. I don't have to go look up a recipe somewhere on a computer. It's right there on my cinnamon bottle where I need it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what advice would you say that you have for any of our patrons who are in the process of losing their sight um, or have lost it?
Well, I think the first thing to think about is, what is it that you're struggling to do? Okay.
Mhm.
So I'll tell you a funny story about my pantry. Back before I had Braille labels, I had flour and I had complete pancake mix in similar canisters. Okay. Similar size, similar shape. I don't know, the flour may have been a bit bigger, but I don't remember. But I got the one out that I thought was flour, and I put a half a cup in a dish, and I dredged my calf's liver, because my husband and I both like liver and onions. I know everybody's going, blah, yuck,
No, my
but
grandma loved them too.
I love it. So
Yeah.
I was dredging the liver in the flour, and I put it in the pan and I cooked it, and we sat down to eat, and that wasn't flour, it was pancake mix.
Oh,
That liver and onions didn't taste so good.
no.
I'm pretty sure we went to Wendy's that night, you know?
Yeah.
But if you're struggling to tell things apart, whether it's in your pantry, in your closet, in your jewelry box, wherever, Braille can be your friend. You can put an index card around a canned good. You can put a little post-it note down in a jewelry box section to, tell the difference between your turquoise and your amethyst. Because
Uh-huh.
if you want to wear amethyst, you don't want to mix it up and wear your turquoise instead, right?
Right.
And there's just so many practical things. So I would think about, if I were where I was back in, let's see, what year would that have been when I learned Braille? It was probably like 94,
Mhm.
95. Okay.
Okay.
So almost 30 years, right?
Yeah.
um, I probably would say that my motivation to learn the Braille alphabet, and when I started, that's all I was going to learn, just the Braille alphabet. That's all I
Mhm.
need. I just need to mark names on file folders. That's it. And then I fell in love with reading Braille and realized how many other places it could help me. And so I went on to learn the entire code. Do you have to do that? Heck no. If you don't ever plan to use contractions, you don't have to. You can spell it out in uncontracted Braille. Now, sometimes it's hard to make that Braille fit where you want it to fit,
Sure.
but there's solutions to that. You can put the Braille and the thing in a Ziploc bag. And that way it stays together and you can get to the Braille label and you can and or the Braille card and you can know that okay, this is my blood pressure medicine. I'm supposed to take this twice a day.
Mhm.
It's the motivation has to be, I think, solving a problem. Is it worth reading Braille or learning Braille just for the glory of learning Braille? Heck yeah. Heck yeah. But most people do things better if they have a motivation, a solution that
Sure.
they're creating.
No, no, that makes absolute sense. Well, I want to thank you so much, Neva, for talking with us today, for sharing your experiences um, and for giving us more information about how Braille has been useful to you, but also how it can be useful to our patrons as well. Thank you so much.
I so enjoyed being here and thank you very much for inviting me.